If you were to ask me, Derek, what would you do differently? I don't think I would do anything differently, honestly.
I think I killed it. I think I absolutely nailed
Yeah,
it.
in the most humble way
Yeah,
possible. Fuck yeah.
I feel you. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody in their career at some point is going to change jobs. For me, I had been with the same company for about 12 years, and I just recently went through a transition period with a new company. For younger people, transition is also I've never had a job before, and now I had my first career job.
Sure.
So I think having an episode and a conversation around how to set ourselves up for success at a new company within the first 90 days will be a really cool and valuable conversation to have, especially for the young professional that hasn't had a lot of experience in the area. So I was reading this book called The First 90 Days, and a stat that jumped out to me was the average new employee, they surveyed a bunch of managers, takes 6 months to give more value to a company than receive. So when I got I don't know, I don't know if I
That
believe
sounds
that.
sandbagged AF, but yeah, continue.
Sandbag, right? Probably a little part of the book that's selling it because it was an introduction part. But
Sure.
regardless, I think that our goal is to try to like accelerate that time between start and value add as much and as quickly as possible. So in the couple weeks that I had between my previous job and my new job, I read through this book. I combed through it, read through it really quick, took a bunch of notes. We're not going to go through all the notes today, but what I boiled it down to was that my transition's been super easy. And what I attribute that to was because I was prepared going into it. So
Mm.
I kind of break this down into two different phases. You have the time before, which I'll consider the preparation phase. And then you have go live, which is essentially your first day onward. And what really helped me in the preparation phase is that I had three categories that I hit it from, three different angles. First is people. So, who's my team? What's their structure? And what are the roles on the team? So try to get an idea of the people that I'm going to be working with starting day one so I can get a sense of prioritizing who I should meet and go deeper into once I'm there. Second thing is industry. So depending on which company you're with, learning a little bit more of the industry and that context that comes with it is very helpful. And then the third is job specific nuance. So if you've never been a business analyst or somebody in finance and you're going into your first job, learn as much about that thing as you can ahead of time. If you're already established in a role, but you are moving into a brand new industry, that means that your job's probably going to change a little bit. So what does that mean? So those are like kind of the key themes around like preparing. And then there's go live, which we can unpack together. But essentially, like, how can I provide value as quickly as possible? So I would love to like start it off, but like, this was my very first experience. But from your perspective, like, you've gone through a couple different transitions throughout your career. Like, does that resonate with you? Is there any stories or lessons that you've picked up along the way?
Yeah, I've switched jobs and companies. Well, I've switched companies 3 times. I've switched jobs, I don't know, 15. And most of them have been within the same company, where I think the same principles can still apply if you're doing a net new job within the same company. And I think the ultimate goal, which you described, and I completely agree with, is add value. Add value as fast as you possibly can, because you want to make sure that the person that brought you in thinks, oh, I made the right decision bringing this person in.
Mm-hmm.
Adding value builds trust throughout the organization. Adding value feels freaking good. It feels good to feel like you're useful and you're not just somebody's little brother or little sister that's like trying to figure out what's going on. And
Mm-hmm.
so Yeah, I think the macro goal when starting is add value. I have seen in a lot of cases people take that way too far. And maybe we can talk about this later, but there's like people who come in hot and like try to add so much value and it's like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
settle down, bro.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I think there's a balance, just like there's a balance in everything in life and in work. So we should talk about that. But yeah, man, I've messed up a lot of career transitions. I think I've done some pretty good. And so it'll be fun to chat through. I like your framework. I think it's a complete one. So maybe we should just start digging in on the first
Yeah.
dimension of like, preparation and people. How do you think about going and doing that?
So this one is going to take a little bit of effort because depending on how you interviewed, you might know only two or three or four people at the max before you start your role. So what I did was at the tail end of accepting the position, I went through and I looked up all the people that I interviewed with via LinkedIn and
Yeah.
messaged them and connected with them there. From there, like I asked them proactively, hey, would you like I'm starting in 2 weeks. I know this is a lot to ask and no pressure, but would you be willing to like meet with me ahead of time so that I can just ask you some more like informal questions and it's outside of the context of an interview? Because we all know interview is not really the representation of the person on the other side or yourself. So like how can we just break the tension and talk more informally? So that was step number one. And then step number
That's
two was
cool.
like,
I've
yeah,
I've never done that. And no
no?
one's ever done that with me. I've done it and other people have done it with me when like I'm the hiring manager and I'm bringing someone in. They're like, "Hey, can we chat again before I start?" And I'll always take that call. I think that's a great call to take. No one has ever reached out to me that I was on like the panel for, say I was on a panel for a product role and they got the job and they weren't reporting it to me and they were like, hey man, you want to like catch up and talk? I would take that call in a minute as well. I think it's really cool. i would be
Mm-hmm.
i would be pretty impressed if somebody did that.
Yeah, I mean, it worked for me. Like when I got it, like a couple people said yes, a couple didn't have the time, which is fine.
Sure.
But when I had the conversation and I had my foot in the door, at the end of the conversation, I asked, "Is there anybody else that I should talk to ahead of time? And will you be willing to help me make that introduction?"
Yeah.
And that I talked, I think, with my almost my entire team before I started because of that, like
Oh,
just
get
chipping
out. So
away.
how many
Yeah,
conversations total did you have?
6 or 7.
That's awesome. Wow. I bet those were so valuable, dude.
Yeah, and I think for them too, it shows. Oh wow, this guy's not even working yet, and he wants to get to know us. So it's like it works. It's a win-win. And, the worst thing that can happen is that they don't have time, and then you meet them on day one. you
Yeah,
know.
they don't have time, or I could see maybe there's just some weirdness about, am I allowed to share stuff with this guy? He hasn't like
Mm,
technically started yet, so maybe clearing it with hiring manager before reaching out to those people. But again, I would have take no issue with that. I don't see any reasons to say no, don't talk to people on the team that you're joining, but maybe worth checking. I don't know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
You're like, yeah, I
mean, just
YOLO'd
kind
it,
of.
whatever.
I don't know. Like, what? It's up to. I don't know anything. There's no trade secrets. If they're not going to share stuff with me unless I'm like prying,
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, I guess that's a good point. But like, I'm always leaning towards the camp of ask for forgiveness, not permission, because you'll learn real quick, and then you'll be like, okay, there's a boundary, hit it. You know?
Right. Oh, sorry. I was excited to start. Like, I
Yeah,
think that one's pretty easy to explain away.
yeah.
Yeah.
The second thing is industry, which you can do this easily by looking at the company website as a starting point, and then with terms that are unusual to you or you just would like to look more into, then you could like Google on the side. But industry is tough depending on how much context you have because you don't want to just go on a rabbit hole. But I think if you start with the company website first, that's a really good way of landing yourself on like what are the different things that we're sharing to customers, that we're offering for services. How do we contact? Like for me, I'm in Salesforce, so I was very curious: is there a Salesforce community? Like, is there a Salesforce tie-in from the back end? So I looked at it from the perspective of where could there be an overlap with my job too. So
Yeah. So I would say that a deep understanding of the company website is something is foundational. and can guide you in the right direction of where to go deeper. But if you don't have a good sense of like core products that are offered, core solutions that are offered, who you're offering them to, how the company is positioned, who your biggest customers are, all of these things are always, on the website. And one of the most, this is almost getting back to like interview. One of the most clear red flags to me is when somebody is interviewing and all they're doing is just like re-spouting things that are on the website to you.
Mm.
Like it happens a lot in cryptos, like because we have a lot of grandiose positioning on the website. It's like, why do you want to come work at Circle? And it sounds like they're just reading the website to me. Um, so I think that yes, I agree. Understand the website, you should absolutely do that. But I would use the website as a guide to go deeper. So if there are case studies on the website, for example, on a customer that did something awesome with your product, then look at that customer and look at LinkedIn and see if there's anyone at that customer that you could talk to. Or maybe they did a webinar recently about their product or their experience. So go deeper on that and then reason about like their pain points and their problems vis-a-vis like
Have
the
you done
job
that
that you're
before?
coming in to solve.
That sounds tough to apply in practice.
I mean, how else do you like go deep on market dynamics? Like how else do you like build a point of view on the market that like your company is operating within? Like the website is always such a glossy view of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's perfectly curated to convert customers. That's what a website is for. If you want real like market signal, like I would argue that you have to go deeper.
Yeah, and you want both sides. That's a important part.
Mm,
The website is your interview self.
yeah.
A website like Glassdoor is your shadow self. So you look at both, right? Like I looked at both, even going into the interview. I looked at the website of the company. I looked at Glassdoor, and I read all the nasty reviews too. And that I came out with questions based on those too, right? Just to get a sense of like, is this just like a disgruntled employee, or is there some meat on this bone? And when you're interviewing somebody, we don't want to make this an interview podcast, but like when you're interviewing with somebody and you ask one of those questions and they shift in their seat a little bit or whatever, like, or they give you an eye,
Got you. Yeah.
that they're not going to come out and say, yeah, the leadership is toxic, da 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 da. But like, people are really bad at lying, so you can maybe,
Yeah, I get that.
yeah,
Yeah, and so I'm excited about this because I also work in business strategy and in product where I think it's probably a lot more relevant to have that broader market context. Um, that's not necessarily true of all roles, right? If you're coming in as a customer service rep or as a finance person or an accountant or whatever, it may not be as relevant for you to know everything about the competitive landscape and who raised money here and all of these things. I think it'd be super interesting just to know anyway, because you're joining this new company and any of this context is going to make you excited about it. And there's no downside in doing it because then you'll have more fire to like talk to people about things because you'll know more about the things that are going on in the company and the industry. It's a no regret thing for me. But point taken that there's like a scale of there's potentially like diminishing returns for like crushing your first 90 days and doing that.
yeah.
Hey there, real quick. Can you do us a quick favor and hit the subscribe button down there somewhere? As a new and growing pod, subscribes are really, really important for us, for people to find us. You know, we do this for free to provide you value in your work and in your life. And if you could just do this one thing for us, it would really help us to continue providing that value. So, real quick subscribe. Back to the video. Happy listening.
Anything else to add on the preparation, like till day one? Because I think that for me, there's not a whole lot you can do preparing. Like those two perspectives are probably where I'd focus the most time through the lens of job specific first, like specifically nuanced to my role. Try to nail down as much as possible in that area, and then get like a broad understanding as much as you can. You don't only have a couple weeks, and you have a job and a personal life, so take that with
Yeah.
reality in perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you had people and you had industry, and then you had a third one.
Well, and like job specific nuance was the
Got
third
it.
thing, but I think it's more of a lens to look through, right? So like you look at people based on like who you're going to interact with and how you're going to do your job right, and then you look at the overall industry from that perspective too. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, exactly. And this is kind of the point that I was just making is like if I'm coming in as a product manager, I should probably understand how products work in the space and how competitors' products work and maybe go use some of them, maybe use the product of my company if I can, those kinds of things. If
mhm.
I'm an accountant coming in, I don't really need to do that. It's not relevant to me. What is relevant to me maybe are like the key FASB requirements that are coming out for my industry. Is there some weird revenue recognition policy or whatever? So, point taken is the lens that you do that preparation through should be like, what is going to set me up to do well in my role? And that's where I dive in.
Yeah,
One
I
other thing
think
that I've appreciated that people do before they start, on my team at Circle is they just ask me, like, what are the resources that I should
mm,
be consuming? What news do you get? What Twitter accounts do you follow? Um, and hey, Sam, like you're gonna be my boss. Like we talked about these things. Like, what are the big projects that you're gonna put on my plate when I get there? And like, how do you think I can prepare for them? Your hiring manager should be able to give you a ton of signal on this stuff. It's not all doesn't all have to be self-directed.
love it. So day one, starting, got my backpack on. My mom packed me a nice brown bag lunch, getting settled into my chair, my desk, my cubicle. How the hell do we set this thing up for success, Sam? How do we get started? I have some ideas, but I'd love your take first.
You come in guns blazing with a ton of ideas and piss a bunch of people off.
Yeah. Rules and what not to do. Let's maybe start with again, three different categories. It's not a surprise to you probably that one the major category what I prioritized number one on my first 90-day roadmap was people and relationships, trying to make that human connection. That was number one. So my very first 2 weeks were littered with introductions. I spent like an hour with my direct team, hour with my manager. Every day I had a touch point with my manager, and then I set up a bunch of 15-minute blast off introduction meetings for leaders in my area, for like top engineers that were in my area, just so that they can put a face to the name, and that when we're in a meeting together on a project, we don't have to do that awkward introduction that's very you know, surface level in that. Like we already cut through all the small talk to
Yep.
introduce.
Yeah, brilliant. I love intros. Now, how do you think about intros of just saying, "Hi, I'm Derek," versus informational interviews, which are a level deeper than that?
Say
And
more about the
sometimes people,
informational interviews.
yeah, sometimes people mash these together just to purely save time. Where I start, it's my first day. I want to go around and meet a bunch of people, and so the structure of the meeting is hi, I'm Sam. I just started. Nice to meet you. What do you do here? Where are you from? Where do you live? Like those kinds of things, just pleasantries. The second, more longer, deeper, like informational interview is all of that stuff. Plus, tell me about what you're working on. Tell me the
Mm,
problems that you have in your space.
mm.
This is the scope of my role. How do you think that we are going to collaborate going forward? Or do you think there's opportunities for us to collaborate in a bigger way? These are the kinds of questions
Mm.
that are really interesting to know because it's great signal in those first critical weeks while you're just information gathering and figuring out where you sit. I think
Mm-hmm.
those are very, very high leverage to do in the first couple of weeks. Informational interviews.
That's a great point. From my perspective, I was prepared for whichever direction the conversation needed to take based on the individual on the other end. I came
Sure.
prepared for both. We could keep this as loosey goosey personal as we want. Where'd you come? Where you live? Where are you born? Family, or we can go tactical project wise. So I used judgment on the fly to determine which direction to take it on based on the other person's response. You
Mm.
can pretty quickly gauge whether somebody wants to get down to business or if they want to be more informal and get to know you on the other side. Um, So I think
Yeah.
coming prepared for both conversations is good. And then if you only get to the interpersonal stuff in that short time and you want to know more, you can use it as a follow up. Hey, would you mind if we get more into like the nitty
A good.
gritty in a follow up
Yeah.
call?
Yeah. I think either approach is just fine, right? And then you're not also snaking a bunch of time from people. But broadly, the intent, if I were to be plopped into a new role today and on day one, the I agree with you. This is the number one thing that I would do is I would sit with as many people as possible in my sphere and like adjacent functions and people that I'm probably going to work with. I'd meet them and I'd learn about their problems and I'd learn about what they do. And
Mm-hmm.
that would be the numero uno focus for the first couple of weeks because it sets the tone for what you're going to be doing going forward. Who you know who you're going to be collaborating with. Yes, you remove those kind of awkward introductions, but also throughout all these conversations as well, you're trying to gauge where you focus and where the biggest impact and value can be created within your role, right? There may be a through line of problems that people are highlighting and maybe one that you came in to solve because that's what new roles are. They're supposed to solve problems. And so your goal in that first couple of weeks is to get crystal clear on what those problems are to be solved. Your hiring manager should feed that to you on a silver platter, but you should build conviction in that through these conversations as well. And
Yeah,
just learn how shit works.
hypothesis, right? That leads into the second category on the go live list, which is like the first is people, so those relationships and setting a good first example. The second is process, how to get
Yeah.
shit done, right? So I spent a lot of time in the first couple weeks too trying to figure out how things go from idea to completion, how work comes into me, how work goes to my team, how things get prioritized, all of like the tools that it takes to get there. And that way I just felt comfortable with like if I needed to request time from somebody or if something came into me like what I need to do next.
Brilliant. Yeah. I wrote a LinkedIn post about this a while ago called Navigating the Org. And I think it's a really underappreciated skill that some people have. And I don't even think most folks think about it as a skill that needs to be built.
Mm-hmm.
Is when I have something that needs to get done, do I know the path that it needs to take to get through the organization to get that thing done? And who needs to be involved? And who are the people that can accelerate it? Who are the people that like those go-getters that like have to see this or that will add like that 10x feedback to it? What are all the boxes that I need to check in order for this thing to get done? And that could take so many different forms. We're working on a board deck right now, and we need to get through legal approval and compliance approval. And before that, we need to make sure that there's business team alignment and then executive alignment. There's like this order of events for like every piece of work that gets done. And depending on the size and scale of your company, that list could get super long and there could be a ton of people in it. And so instead of being lost 6 months into your role, wandering the halls trying to figure out how to get something done, prioritizing a crystal clear understanding of how things should get done, how things already get done at your org the right way, and the people that need to be involved is like, it's a superpower, dude. And it
Mm-hmm.
actually takes a lot longer than one would think because another element, which goes back to your first point, is there are some critical people in a lot of those paths for every product that needs to get shipped. You definitely want product leadership alignment and CPO alignment at my company. So it would definitely behoove me to have great relationships with the product leadership and the CPO. So I'm going to go and prioritize that when I start. That
Mm-hmm.
kind of signal is very, very helpful to build. And I think a lot of where to look and where to go deeper will come out of some of those initial relationship building questions and informational interviews that you have. So it's all about kind of paying attention to like how stuff gets done the right way and then figuring out how your work maps in and how you
Mm-hmm.
can embed yourself into that.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more with that one.
Yeah, so if you have those relationships, you now know how things get done from a very high level and happy path perspective, and hopefully you've been doing some learning along the way. Now it comes into like, what value can I create? So hopefully along that process of learning about people, learning what the problems are, and learning how things get done, you've been listing things that are quick wins. What's something
Mm.
that I could do tomorrow that would improve XYZ? And then in the same line, have a different bucket, a different category for what are the strategic things that are going to take a long time to do, but you know that there's value to be had with coming up with those strategies and those plans. So for me, like an example of that is when I came in, the first thing that I realized that everybody had a problem with was we had a lot of errors coming in the system, like errors that I've had experience with fixing in the past. But these are really nasty errors and they ruin the customer experience. Within the very first 2 weeks, I took from my previous experience a solution that I implemented. And within the first 2 weeks, we were able to reduce the error frequency in production by 75%. So now
Gangster.
imagine like me posting that
Gangster.
to my team and division saying, here are the stats. We improved by this much. Boom, credibility right out the gate, right?
Yeah, that's hot.
We should be trying to look for those things where they could be as small, it doesn't matter how big they are. But if you put something into place that's going to make somebody's life easier, then immediately you're going to have credibility with the team. So that's another way to accelerate your value.
Wait a second. So you're telling me in the first 2 weeks I have to go have 1,000 meetings, and then also I got to think about how I'm going to immediately add value? This sounds like an incredible amount of work. And if someone said that to me, I would respond and be like, "Yeah." It's like, yeah, I think that an expectation going into your first 90 days is those first 90 days are going to be pretty intense. Like, you should work a lot. You should work a lot of extra hours. And I know how people have an allergic reaction to working more than 40 hours a week or whatever it is,
But
but I
Sam,
think the
what about
expectation
work-life balance?
there's no such
What?
thing as work-life balance, says Scott
Yeah,
Galloway. It's only trade-offs.
yeah,
But
yeah. It's more
I
like a
believe that
season. So I,
it's a
I guess
season.
one thing, yeah, one thing I forgot in the preparation is it's not just about work. Setting the expectations with your family.
Ooh, good one. And your friends
Mm,
and your, yeah,
mm.
other
Yeah, guys.
aspects of your life.
The first month, maybe two, I'll get to you when I can. But like this is going to be a transition for me, and it's going to set me up for success if I nail it the first 2 months. So be patient with me.
Yeah, this is really good. You set those expectations with me about podcast stuff when you started at Zen Business, right? We recorded a bunch of podcasts ahead of time knowing that your attention was going to be a bit fractured because you're starting a new gig. And I didn't even question it because I get it. But
Mm-hmm.
not everybody may get it. Your wife or your partner may not get it. Your family may not get it. Well, that's going to have to be okay for a minute. I like your framing of this is just a season, albeit a short season of your life where the expectation should be you go in intense and you work a lot because that's going to provide dividends in a big way down the road.
Yeah, that was really it from like it from the perspective of the first 90 days. I mean, all of those things, right? So let's just recap real quick. We got preparation. You got the human side of things. You got the industry specific things that you can learn about, all from the perspective first of your job and the specific nuances of your job and your role. And then once you start, again, prioritize the human connection, the relationships, and the people that are going to be working closest with you, and the areas that you're going to rely on getting some dependency resolved there. So once you have the preparation down and you get started, you're going to want to prioritize the human side of things, the connections, make as many introductions and put a face to the name with as many people as you can, strategically, not blindly, but like based on who you need to connect with to help get the shit done. How do you get shit done? What are the processes? How do you get from farm to table? And then
Farm to table. That's brilliant. Oh, dude. Yeah.
So you learn the how, the who, and the what, and then from
Yeah.
the perspective along the way, trying to find some quick wins. Some ways to add value quickly, while also coming up with those big strategic things that you should be aligning with your manager on as well. Of what's going to be the thing that's going to really impact us, but I can't get it done in 90 days. It's going to be a longer term
Mm,
objective.
cool. On the farm to table analogy, so I think there's an 80-20 here. We just did the farm to table meat and potatoes. So you got the beef that was grown in the pasture down the road. You got the potatoes that were grown in the backyard. Those are on the plate now. Now we're gonna
Slaughtered some cows. Yep.
now we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna throw in some sides, some veggies, a little bit of zhuzh on the side. Okay, there's a 20% where I think there's a lot of cool things and interesting things that you can do on top of the foundation. Have the foundation nailed, but on top of that, there are cool things and things that you could or should do. And we can jam on those. One thing is, and I know nobody does this, but write down what success looks like for you in your first 90 days and share that with your boss.
Mm-hmm.
I would say maybe 2 out of 10 bosses will do that with you. Say, like, here's your 30, 60, 90 plan. This is what I want you to be doing in the first 90 days. Personally, I like to do those just because it disambiguates things. I've never had anyone do it with me. I would love it if somebody was like, yeah, this looks cool, but I'm going to make these edits based on like what I just learned in these first couple of informational interviews that I've run for the last couple of weeks. I'm going to make these amendments to it. What do you think? And you have written down a plan for the next 3 months of how you're going to go and kill it. So there's like perfect alignment with your boss. Uh, I like these things because I thrive on this kind of structure. I know
Mm-hmm.
maybe you, and I think it's stylistic because I think you probably are a little more fluid and that's just how you like to operate, and that's just fine. But
Mm-hmm.
curious your take on that one.
100%. I mean, from a manager perspective, I ask the person on the other side what they prefer.
Yeah.
So like I'll do it through 30, 60, 90-day plan if I can tell and they're saying that they're structured, but it's got to be something that they want because it's not natural for me to do. So like I don't personally want or need a 30, 60, 90, but I know that that's valuable to a lot of people. So yeah, 100%.
Something to explore and maybe
Mm-hmm.
something to think about within the context of your role or your personality. The other one was the newsletter thing. I think it's really cool. You want to talk about that one? Are you going to do that or?
I'm thinking about it. I've been thinking about it more recently now that I've met a lot of people. I just haven't solidified it. But for those that are listening, what the internal newsletter is a concept that we learned from one of the podcasters. I think it's Sean that
Sean
had
Puri at
this.
My First Million. Yeah.
My First Million, who when he started, and I think it was with Amazon or
Twitch.
Twitch, yeah, he did a weekly newsletter to an email distro of his colleagues and friends, just basically recapping his last week, what's on his mind, both personal and professional. And apparently, it became like really big, and a lot of people like enjoyed it and wanted to subscribe to this inside the company. And I had never heard of like an internal, like a newsletter or like blog um, for internal consumption with your colleagues. I thought it was brilliant though, and I we kind of talked about it, and I was like, I would love to do that with my new company. I'm not there yet, and I think it's kind of a weird thing to do within the first 90 days. Oh, here's
Yeah.
a well, I think you need a little bit more social connection and history before, and all of a sudden you're blasting people with a bunch of baby pictures.
Yeah.
Um,
His context was a little different. Like his company was acquired. He was a very senior leader, those kinds of things. And I
yeah.
think he may have done it right off, but I agree with you. If you're like more junior or like even a director or whatever, you're coming in on day one being like, here's what I'm thinking. Like
Yeah,
it
like
could be a little arrogant.
imagine we had Ross on the Ross, the CEO of the company that we're at, where I'm at, and now I have his email address, so I'm like pumping him with like a weekly newsletter. Probably
Hey, we're
not
best friends
very
now, right?
smart.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah.
what? So like you want to? I'll be in Austin next month if you want to get drinks.
Right. You want to go to the Sizzler and get some grub? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's right. That's right. It's a fun and a cool idea, but done in the right context, I think it could be really great. Done in the wrong context, it could potentially be disastrous. But what I also will say is, I work at a company of almost 1,000 people. There's a lot going on, and so once you start to get to that kind of size, inevitably you start getting all of these push updates, these updates on like the product update, or I send one on monetization, and there's just all these kinds of updates, and they're
Mm-hmm.
very project management-y in nature, where it's like, here's the status, red, yellow, green, here's the target date, here's the updates from the last month, whatever. I think it would be really cool to do one that's more friendly and consumable. This guy Ali used to run growth at Circle. He's no longer here, but he used to write this growth update, and everybody looked forward to it because it was funny as hell. He was running just a pipeline of growth experiments, and he didn't have a pipeline in his weekly emails. He just had the themes, and he wove in all of these memes and funny shit, and he just made a bunch of jokes about everything. And honestly, like when that email popped up in my inbox, it was like an insta open and read because it
Mm.
was just some levity in the middle of the day. Now, again, balance with everything. If you're not funny, or if you don't want to have like humor attached to your personal brand, that's fine. Um, but thinking about like how you can innovate on some of these things to make yourself stand out at a new company, maybe something interesting to explore. You're like, I would never do that.
No, no, I would. I would. Absolutely, I would.
Yeah.
I've been thinking, so what I've been thinking about doing, my version of this would be probably video. I think that's the medium that I would use because we're in a virtual setting and we get so much Slack updates that I don't know if I want to give another Slack message for people to read. Nobody's on email. So what I'd
Right.
probably do, because nobody's doing it, is I would create some sort of 1 minute, like a 60-second thing, whatever it is. And I would edit it. I would put some memes, some funny shit, personal stuff, jokes, whatever. And I would just ship it like that. Like just start small with my team or something like that. I don't even know if 60 seconds is enough, but I would try to keep it as short as possible.
That's cool. And it's also, you raise another good point, which is having a good sense and pulse on the company culture and where the conversation is happening. Is it in email? Is it in Slack? Is it in person? Something else that I've seen super effective that new people do at Circle, because it's the same. Most of the conversation is happening in Slack. We have all of these Slack channels that are very, very active. We have a crypto market Slack channel and a competition Slack channel. And one of our biggest competitors, we have a Slack channel about that. We just post news and talk about things. If those conversations are live and like happening in your company, figure out how to participate in those. Post articles in there, comment on the articles that people are posting. Wow, that's interesting. Ask a question.
Mm,
So just join the conversation.
love it.
That's a good thing to do, and that's easy. And then your name is starting to pop up. You're having conversations with people that you may have not met or from different teams. It's super useful.
You know what's an interesting common theme through all of this is, dude, it's a cliche for a reason, but being there, showing up is half the battle. So what we've
Yeah.
kind of uncovered throughout all this conversation is make the effort. People will notice and people will appreciate it at the end of the day, you know? It's hard to fault somebody that even if they're struggling, if they're really trying. It's really hard to not like somebody that you could tell cares and is doing everything that they can to get up to speed or figure things out, even if they're not there yet.
Yeah. And that brings me to, I think, where people get the first 90 days wrong, because if you go too far with that, it can very quickly be frustrating to people, where
Mm-hmm.
you're posting a zillion Slacks and messages in the general channel every day, or you're coming in too hot with ideas and thoughts and strategies when you don't have a full understanding of everything that's going on, because you care, but on the receiving end of that, people may just think you're being arrogant. And so as a broad principle is like, in your first 90 days, especially, like, lead with curiosity. You're new there, and it's okay that you're new there. Just be curious, ask questions before you come with answers. If you think you have an answer, great. Make sure that you're submitting that answer or presenting that answer as someone that's in their first 90 days, just thoughtfully and carefully and in the right sections. Like we talked about navigating the org. Where do you present this answer? Where's the right place to do that and the right forum to do that? But man, I can't count the number of people that have come in too hot. Like I think that's like a pervasive problem. Trying to like make a name for yourself or create something and just coming in too hot, and that can get frustrating.
Yeah, it's a skill to be at the right place at the right time, sending the message to the right people. But it matters, and it's something that only happens with reps. So I think, don't be afraid, but be conscious and mindful of what you're sending out there. Think before you act, but act. Default aggression is Jocko Willink's word, right? Like, default to action, but think about it before you do.
Word.
Cool, man. Yeah, that's it. That's the first 90 days, and it's been great. I mean, if you were to ask me, Derek, what would you do differently? I don't think I would do anything differently, honestly.
I think I killed it. I think I absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, in the most humble way possible. Yeah. Fuck yeah.
I feel it. Yeah, good for you, bro. No, yeah, seriously, I mean,
it's been great. It's been great, and like, obviously you can't do this all on your own. It takes a really solid team and company culture to like enable you. So I don't, I'm not ignorant to the fact that it's not like a single man show, but it's been really fun, and I've gotten nothing but good feedback. So that's part. It's not just me. It's like the people that I work with saying things too. So yeah, man, it's been great. Looking forward to continuing on now, working on some more strategic and visionary stuff rather than like knocking out the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, bang. Sweet. All right, is that the pod?
It's the pod.
Zip it up and zip it out.
See you in another time.
Zippity-doo-dah. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us at The Workflow. If you like what you just heard, could you take 1 second and give us a like, subscribe, follow, or leave a review on the platform you're listening to this podcast? It will really help us out as we're growing the pod. We'd also love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future topics you'd like us to cover, folks you'd want us to chat with, or any feedback in general, just shoot us a note at workflowshow@gmail.com. Again, that's workflowshow@gmail.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.